Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you please stand and join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next we have approval of the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded we approve the agenda as published. Any comment by the board? In that case, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 And that motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have public comment. The total time we have tonight allocated for public comment is not to exceed 30 minutes. Each speaker will have 3 minutes, and if you wish to have somebody speak for you or select a representative to speak, you're welcome to do so. Also, I'd like to just add, if people keep saying the same thing, of course, you can just refer to that rather than just making the same argument. If it gets too long, I'll give you a high sign and we'll let you know that you're over your time limit. Also, I'd just like to say if we'd like to give your name and where you live, what city you're from, and if you have children in one of our schools, which school they attend. Okay. And we'll start right off with that, right off the bat here. And the first one on here is Nikki. Continue.
Hi, should I go over here?
You surely may take the podium if you'd like.
Okay. So I timed this, but that's speaking really quickly, so do I have to be exactly 3 minutes?
We'll try to be as lenient as we can.
Perfect, okay. My name is Nikki Kazanis, and I live in Sandpoint, Idaho, and I have 2 sons attending the Sandpoint High School. Okay, so the purpose of the school board is to serve as a bridge between the school and parents, students, and our community. According to the Idaho School Board Association standards, Standard 1.1 states the educational stakeholders, which consists of schools, families, and community, participate in the development and/or revision of school district vision. Standard 3.4 states the board involves interested community members. Standard 5.1 states the board solicits input from staff and a wide spectrum of community so that a diverse range of interests and perspectives on issues is considered. Standard 6.2 states the board solicits input from the superintendent, staff, and community regarding refinements needed. The Lakeland School District does not currently have, nor have they ever had, a mask mandate since the 2020-2021 school year began, despite the pressures that the Panhandle Health District previously forced and coerced upon its school board trustees. A pressure we understand to have had the greatest impact on your decision to issue the current Lake Penderile School District's mask mandate, as opposed to any parental and or community input in said decision. This past Thursday, October 22nd, the Panhandle Health District voted 4-2 to end the previous mask mandate. This decision came about partially due to the pressures our public bestowed upon the board members in which our citizens expressed grave opposition to the prior egregious mandate. During the summer of 2020, parents of public school students within the Lake Penderile School District were polled as to whether or not they wanted their children to either 1, attend school in person with required face coverings and social distancing, or 2, continue school learning via distance learning. However, this was an inaccurate and intentionally deceptive way of polling the parents, as not one time were parents asked as to whether or not they wanted their children to be required to wear a face covering of any sort or social distance, nor were they asked whether or not they wanted their children to attend school for the full day of school or incorporate a hybrid learning plan. It was a sneaky, deceptive, and biased way of polling parents in an attempt to achieve a skewed representation of what parents truly wanted for their children. Our request as parents is simple and specific. We would like another poll sent out to all parents of public school students within the Lake Penn-Doral School District, this time specifically asking whether or not they would like their students to be required to wear face coverings of any sort, mask, face shield, etc., or not. Also to ask parents whether or not they would like for their children to attend school for the full day or to incorporate a hybrid learning plan. The parents' wishes as a whole should be honored and reflected in the school board trustees' decisions. You all were selected individually to honor positions as a bridge between the school and parents, students in our community. It is time to give us a fair, unbiased say in these major public school decisions.
Thank you, Mrs. Kristen Dodd. Good evening, Kristen.
I'm Kristen Dodd. I live in Sandpoint. My stepson attends the Sandpoint Middle School. I don't have a nice printed out copy of a speech, so I'm going to kind of go off the cuff a little bit. I have a few things I wanted to address regarding policies as well. The masking policies, I find them to be discriminatory. I wanted to point out a couple of facts, some data that I looked up in regards to children and COVID-19. Total in Idaho, the hospitalization rate is 0.9%. Child deaths right now for COVID-19 are 0 or 0%. Total deaths due to COVID-19 in Idaho are 546, which is only 0.1218%. And that's Idaho as a whole. I didn't drill down to Bonner County, but I know that here it's even lower. So with that being said, more studies are coming out as well, saying that children are not the carriers for COVID-19 that they were previously thought to be. And my feelings are that the number of students that are being negatively affected by the masking and face covering policies far exceeds any risk that is imposed by them not wearing a mask. Additionally, there are no peer-reviewed studies that show that masks help prevent a virus, but there are many that show they are useless. If a mask is worn for any length of time, moisture builds up in the mask, and that means that they become a harbor for any bacteria or virus droplets that come and hit that mask, and then they seep right through. So surgical masks are used to protect the patient, and they're changed out frequently. So masks are not being used as they're intended in this case. I'd like to mention some ways that kids are being negatively affected so far by being suspended. A couple of kids I know for sure have been suspended since the start of school because they didn't want to wear a mask. Kids and our athletes have been missing sporting events due to not wanting to wear a mask, and kids are being discriminated against. I'm not sure how this benefits our kids. My stepson, he doesn't feel like he's getting a good childhood right now because of all of the negativity and the fear that's being instilled in our kids' minds. I find it to be brainwashing, quite frankly, and it's dehumanizing for kids to not be able to see faces and to feel like they're being isolated. And speaking of isolation, it is illegal to quarantine and isolate somebody who's not sick. You're only allowed to do that with people that are healthy, and masking is a form of isolation. And so you're treating all these kids like they're all sick, forcing them to wear a mask every day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Jones. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Dillon. I'm from Sandpoint. I have 2 younger children that were in elementary school at Washington last year. I'm homeschooling them currently. I'm going to discuss something a little different, but it ties into what I call the trickle-down effect, which I think is why a lot of school districts and specifically health districts are feeling pressure. And what I want to start with is, I don't know if you all are familiar with a document called the White House Profile for Idaho. I don't know if anybody's seen that document in this group, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because we are all tied into this current situation because of money. And I'm going to link where I'm going with this. On March 13th, 2020, President Trump announced $50 billion in federal funds for COVID-19, and Governor Little declared Idaho a state of emergency. On March 25th, 2020, the Senate approved $2 trillion from the stimulus, and on March 25th, 2020, Governor Little put Idaho into what's called an extreme state of emergency. When we were put into an extreme state of emergency on March 25th, 2020, the local news reported, and you can check this, there were 136 cases of COVID. No hospitalizations, no deaths. Now where I'm going with this is when Governor Little entered into this agreement, basically he is now under contract and he has mandates that need to trickle down. These mandates are mandates that we're all seeing in our society. We're seeing them in our health districts and in our school districts. And I just want to point out to this board that I believe a lot of you realize that the masks really are not preventing a virus for our school children. I believe you believe that, and I know I do. And I have to ask everyone here, the money, it's always about the money. I want everyone to seriously look at these facts and understand that if I sign a contract, I'm under obligation, and I'm going to have my team of people go to the people below me, and I'm going to mandate these items because I have to. I've taken that money. I'm under contract. This is very disturbing to me, what I'm seeing going on, and it's not just our state. But I feel compelled to share this information with everyone and realize these are our children. This is our community. Who's in the hospital dying right now? You guys, I'm going to share one other story with you. There's a health district in the Southwest District of Health in Idaho. The people on that board, that health district, actually openly stated they were contacted by the governor's COVID team and given pressure for specific mandates. They openly stated this. You can find this information. And they decided they were going to stand up. And they did. And they didn't enforce these mandates. I'm asking you to think about our children in this community. Do your research and take it seriously. Thank you.
Next is Heather, is it Zane?
The idea that healthy people are endangering others simply by breathing is the biggest scam
Heather,
in the history of
where
the
do you
world.
live?
I live in Sagal, Idaho. I have a kid at Southside and Sandpoint Middle School. I'll repeat that since you interrupted me. The idea that healthy people are endangering others simply by breathing is the biggest scam in the history of the world. Your job is to be an educational director, to make and form curriculum through the teachers. You are not dictators. You do not make health decisions for my children. It's not going to happen. So, masks are proven to not work. If there was scientific proof of some sort that masks stopped this virus, I would be wearing them as well. I'm not the type to protest or to stand against something because most of the things that are protested and stand against are stupid. But this is something that our future depends on. My kids depend on this. They are being muzzled. This is tyranny, as far as I'm concerned. You do not get to tell me what I can and can't do with my kids. So all I'm asking is that we get the same respect as the people that want to wear masks. If they want to send their kids to school with masks on, that's fine. But when there's a 99.67% survival rate to a virus, I'm more worried about getting AIDS. I think you all are old enough to know what you have to do to get that. That's how scary I'm not scared of this virus. Like, I don't want my kids wearing a mask. I want a choice. There shouldn't be a mandate. Well, there isn't a mandate in our county at all. So Panhandle Health District did never mandate Bonner County. We were told by the principal of the high school that Panhandle Health District mandated the school district. That's a lie. It was you guys. None of you guys have a medical background. None of you guys even have an educational degree. All I'm asking is for a choice. For our kids to not have to wear a mask in school. Just to have the same respect as everyone else, because it doesn't work. There's a lot more pneumonia viruses going around, bacterial infections in lungs. That's all because people are breathing in their own bacteria. We have a right to breathe, and we don't want to be muzzled anymore.
Thank you very much. Next we have Sherry Tilford.
I brought my timer, so I'll try not to go over this time.
My name is Sherry Tilford. I live in Sandpoint. I have a daughter at the Homeschool Academy. And I have a lot to say, so I'm going to speak fairly quickly because I really don't want to go over. My notes in order here. Okay, so I debated a lot what I would say today because there's a lot to say. And I could talk about facts and data, but unfortunately those aren't very popular at the moment. But there's a startling statistic I just want to go over really quickly, and that is if you test positive, which is debatable in the first place what that means, for the coronavirus, you have a 2,473% higher chance of dying in a car crash. So I don't think we have outlawed driving around with our kids. So what I would like to focus on is the operational COVID protocol through the Lake Pondere School District. It says on the website that face coverings are expected to be worn, and I will stress the word expected because it does not say required. I spoke with the high school vice principal last week about this protocol, and he said, and I quote, "They have to wear some kind of face covering. Those are the requirements per the board policy. We are tasked with following the board." So I clarified with him, and I had this conversation on recording so I could quote him exactly. I clarified him on the word expect or expectation or expected or whatever form you want to use, and he said, and I quote, "We've been told to interpret that as required." So the Webster's Dictionary has 470,000 entries, and the average English speaker knows 42,000 words. So to me it seems disingenuous to use the word expect when what you really mean is required. Why be unclear? Mean what you say and say what you mean, please. There are 48 documents on the LPOSD website under the student heading. I read through most of these, scanned some of them, there's a lot there. There are countless uses of the word shall, several uses of the word must, 56 uses of the word require, and 21 uses of the word expect, always paired with caveats for personal choice and clearly defined consequences for not meeting that expectation. Under form number 3340 in the due process, corrective actions and discipline, suspensions, this is a quote, "suspensions shall be used only for instances of serious student misconduct." So apparently wearing an ineffective piece of fabric over your face has risen to serious misconduct. Why aren't parents and students being allowed choice here? Parents are allowed to exempt students from vaccines. Why not masks? A face covering requires lack of social cues are in facial expressions. Being able to see someone's face is very important in not having an unconscious fight, flight, or freeze response. It induces fear. Fear requires an enormous amount of energy. Face masks are a constant reminder to be afraid. There's a million more things I could say, but I'm running out of time, so I want to leave you guys with a couple of quotes. Giordano Bruno, a 16th century Italian philosopher, said, "It is proof of a base and low mind for one to wish to think with the masses or majority merely because the majority is the majority. Truth does not change because it is or is not believed by a majority of the people. There's misinformation and fear-mongering pushed on us by yellow journalism trying to pass itself off as news. Doesn't matter how many times you say something, it doesn't change the veracity." And then lastly, Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to when you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. So, question I have for you is, when will this end? Lastly, teaching does not equal learning. What our kids are learning is to be constantly afraid, and that's not good.
Next we have, is it Ben Barnes? Is that correct?
Oh, Bree Barnes?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Cree.
That's okay. My name is Brianna Barnes. I have a niece who I'm a guardian of in the Sandpoint Middle School, and then I also have a daughter who is here right now at the Sandpoint High School. And I want to talk about what nobody I feel is talking about. You don't hear it in the news. You don't hear it anywhere. And we err on the side of masks are safe. But what about, I was in the military for 14 years. I'm a combat vet. What do? Anytime I put any of my soldiers, I would lead a whole 30-man platoon. Anytime we do any situation, we assess the risk. If we're going to go run in 20-degree weather, me as a leader, and you guys are educators directing our principals to lead these students, I sit down and I say, okay, it's cold. We need cold weather gear. You assess the risk and you outweigh the risk versus the outcome. So if the risks outweigh the given outcome that you want to receive, you have to go back and reassess the situation. So we want to assess masks on our children. We don't get a choice. It's either you wear it or you don't. You can get a doctor's note, but with the doctor's notes, and there's many other parents here that have doctor's notes that have instilled it into the school or sent their kids with a note to the school, who are getting phone calls from nurses trying to wonder why the kids have mask notes, which I think is a violation of HIPAA laws. So what I want to talk about is the risks of masks that nobody's talking about. This study was brought forth in 2015 from Sydney, Australia. It's really hard to find anything anymore because so much censorship, but 1,607 hospital healthcare workers across 14 hospitals in the Vietnamese capital split into 3 groups. Those wearing medical masks, those wearing cloth masks, and a control group based on usual practice, which included mask wearing. Workers used the mask on every shift for 4 consecutive weeks. Our kids have far surpassed that because they've been in school 2 months already. The study found respiratory infection was much higher among healthcare workers wearing cloth masks. The penetration of cloth masks by particles was almost 97% compared to medical masks with 44%. So no matter what way you go, it's not looking good. Professor Raina McIntyre led the study, and author and head of UNSW's School of Public Health and Community Medicine, said the results of the study caution against the use of cloth masks, which most of our kids are wearing, matching it to their outfits, trying to be trendy. It's quite sad. The authors speculate that the cloth mask, moisture retention, their reuse, and poor filtration may explain the increased risk of infection. Coming from a place who now is requiring masks or vaccinations to get a job. So let's jump over to the CDC, which everyone wants to quote when any mandate is put out. Center for Disease Control reported release in September shows that masks and face coverings are not effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19, even for those people who consistently wear them. So I'm going to just quote or give you guys some numbers. So, and then this is the last thing I have to say. Reported use of cloth face coverings on or a mask 14 days before the onset of illness. So 14 days before, never 6 people, rarely 6 people, sometimes 11, often 22, and always. They reported always wearing a mask anytime they were out, social distancing, 108 cases compared to 6 cases who never wore them. So are the masks really protecting our children? Are we lowering their immune system? And this school board is going to have to worry about lawsuits on lung infections in our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Board, for letting me speak this evening. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Melinda Rossman. I'm a property owner and taxpayer in Bonner County, and I'm also an educator and work for Lake Conway School District, and I'm proud to do so. Over the last 5 years, I've supported every initiative this district has put forward. I've put lawn signs and supported it. I told you I'd pay triple taxes to support a levy. I will work hard for this district, and I'll continue to work hard. But I've had many educators call me and say, can you speak for me? And because I'm not afraid of this COVID thing, this whole farce, I totally support the hard work that you guys have to put forth to make sure everything works for everybody to be in school. But teachers want to be back in the classroom. We want the masks off the children. We want the mandates to go away. My husband works for the Department of Defense. He says masks are like shooting a BB into an open garage. They're worthless. Here's what I want to say. When you follow and work within a box, when you work within the parameters of a box, there's only sides to see. So if we step out of the box and think differently and become cyclic and community-oriented, more circular in our thinking, I think we can have a completely different vision of what we can say and become here in North Idaho. And we can do something differently. We can take a stand for our families, for our children, for the future, and get rid of fear, because we only have fear to fear. Fear, what is the saying? You only fear itself. You only fear itself. But let's get out of the box. We can do it. We know the facts. We know the numbers. And you guys got me so riled. And you know I've been doing the research since I stopped being afraid. So I want you to know I support you. I support everything you have to do for us to keep the schools open. But I think we can even go further. I think we can take a bigger stand and make a statement nationwide, potentially. But I'll continue to do my job, and I'll continue to do what you asked me to do. But maybe we could step outside the box. Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Anna Leah Eastman. Good evening.
Good evening, School Board. My name's Annalie Eastley. Did I write my maiden name on that?
Easily.
Okay, good. I heard my maiden name when you said my name. That was so weird. Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. Hello, fellow Bonner County residents. My family and I live in the Selly Valley. I have children who would usually be two in Sandpoint High School, one at Northside in 6th grade, and then I have a special needs son who's been attending Farnham Sidwell for 5 years. They're all being homeschooled right now, which is an incredible hardship on our family. However, I felt at this moment it is the best thing for my children to do because of the things that have been said here earlier, both about statistics about risk from the disease, about the effects of masks. And I have zero judgment for any adult in this room who chooses to wear a mask. That is your choice, and I support you in it. I fully support you in your choice. I would ask for the same respect, as I said earlier. So, along with the stats that were said earlier, recently I read a number, and it may be a little higher now, but there were 180,000 deaths attributed to COVID in the United States as a whole. That works out to 6 per 10,000. 6 per 10,000. That is a vanishingly small percentage. In Bonner County, if we were running at that rate, it means we would have 24 COVID deaths as of a few weeks ago. We're not even close. Early on, I was one of the first people to keep my family home because I was really concerned about what was going on. I was watching the stats, I was watching the news. And then as time went on and research began to be done and more statistics came out, I no longer saw the value. In Sweden, 0 school children have died from this disease, although they have had 0 shutdowns of schools, by the way. As I began to be skeptical about the masks, I did some research and I found a study, which I'm happy to send to you, done at the University of Turkey on surgeons and their oxygen saturation for their blood during surgery in the OR with an artificially elevated level of oxygen in the room. The drop from wearing a mask for 2 hours was significant enough to be a medical concern. Their ability to think and make good decisions during surgery.
Recently, a New York Times article came out very recently that said 90% of positive tests shouldn't be positive because they are running the cycles so many times that they're picking up fragments of a coronavirus, not live viruses. And the viral loads would have to be between 100 and 1,000 times greater for these people to even be sick. My youngest son has special needs. I'm almost done. He has missed out on a tremendous number of hours of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. He is severely delayed and on the autism spectrum. I am doing the best I can. But I'm not willing to put him in a situation that is so stressful, where he doesn't see faces. So key for him to see faces, where he can go out but he's not allowed to play like he normally does. You can't explain these things to him. He doesn't get it. And so I'm doing the best I can. But please, do your research and don't require children to give up things that they don't need to. Thank you.
And the last speaker we have is Jessica Hart. Good. Good evening.
Thank you for having me. Mine's short and sweet. A lot of people covered everything already. If you look around this room right now, you can see who is and who is not wearing a mask, and that's their choice, just as our kids should have a choice. If parents or students are scared to send their kid to school with other students not in masks, then they don't really believe that their masks work. And fortunately, that they have other options like distance learning. We are talking about a 99.997% survival rate for kids up to age 19. The seasonal flu has a higher survival rate, less of a survival rate. Never have we mandated masks, forced children into damaging institutionalized settings, or destroyed our economy over the flu. We were told it would take 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and here we are. If masks worked, California would be reopened, and the state would have been back to normal long ago. We need to revisit what we are doing to our children and what the long-term mental health risks will be from doing all this. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the public comment. I'd just like to say thank you all very much for coming. I think you are all very articulate. You put a very good case forward, and certainly gives us something to think about. Of course, much of what you say we agree with. It's one of these things that we have difficulty handling it and coming up with the right decision. But as you know, public comment, we don't answer. It's not one of those things that we can do. But I do want to thank you and compliment you very much. We're going to start our regular meeting now, and you're welcome to stay for that. But you're also welcome to leave if you'd like to. So we'll just continue our meeting.
It'll be on the website. There's no paper copies, but it's on.
I have an extra. I got an extra one.
It's basically, we go from here. We have had our annual audit. So we're going to go over the previous year's budget, what the auditor said, and kind of get an update on the financial picture. That's the major item that's coming up next. So,
Yeah. So you're going to open it, Michelle?
So, Michelle, can you hear me? Yes, I can. Awesome. Okay, so I am going to turn you around and you're going to see the board. And I am going to be flipping through the slides. I think it'll be delayed on your end, but they'll be able to see and I will just stay up with you. Sorry, I'm just switching screens really quick here. Michelle, can you still hear me? I can. Okay. just want them to be able to see you, so I apologize. All I see is myself. That's not, I want to see you. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. So I apologize. That's probably about the best you have of the board. That's probably not all 5 of them either.
Hi, Michelle.
She doesn't have to see us.
Hello, good evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening to present the financial statement audit for June 30th, 2020, and especially in this new environment. So I appreciate you being flexible with me with this. So hopefully you can hear me. If not, let me know, and I'll try to speak louder if that's possible. So my name is Michelle Hainline, and I'm the President and Director of Audit in the Magnuson Company, and I'll be presenting the overview of the financial statements. Next slide. I can't see the slides, so hopefully
Michelle, we are there. We're at what is an audit.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So, always want to touch base on what is an audit, just so there's some clarification and clarity when it comes to what an audit is. So what an audit is an examination and evaluation of financial statements to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. So keeping in mind that management is actually fully responsible for the presentation of the financial statements, and we only express an opinion on the financial statements, but management is responsible for disclosures and fair presentation. So just always like to kind of overview of what an audit really is, because some people don't really understand the meaning of a financial statement audit. Next slide.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And so the next slide is why is an audit required? Again, there's several reasons, especially as far as the school district goes. Primarily, one of the major reasons is because you receive federal funds. So just because you receive federal funds, and you are required to have an audit under the government auditing standards and uniform guidance. There's another reason too that we perform what's called a single audit, and this is the test of your federal funds if you have received in excess of $750,000 in federal grants. And lastly, of course, the state of Idaho does require, and there's a mandate for the state statute that a financial statement audit is performed as well. Next slide. So, audit results. Now getting to the point of what we are actually opining on and issuing the financial statements and the opinion. I'm very glad to announce that you are once again receiving an unmodified clean opinion. The opinion is actually, the pages 1 and 2 are of the opinion from the Magnuson McHugh. And what it is stating is that it's reasonable assurance that the statements are free from material misstatement. And the financial statements provide the adequate disclosure and also the presentation. So this is the one report that is the only part that comes from our company, from an audit. There's only two other pieces of information that is actually from our the company itself. And those are the pages way back in the 6.3 million that is considered unassigned or assigned. So this is kind of combined from various resources. One is, you can see the next bullet, there's an increase in over $2 million from prior year to increase your fund balance to this 6.2 million. The actual revenues in the general fund were 1.27 in excess of the budget. Looking back, when you reference it to, if you go back to page 60 in the financial report, you can see here, this is coming from a variety of different resources, and it's very well defined in that statement. The majority of it, though, is from the increase in property taxes and also some interest income that you had received. The other thing is that your actual expenditures were actually $662,000 lower than budget. Again, this is come from a variety of different resources, line items, and again, it's very well detailed on page 60. And considering the situation that you have been faced with COVID and having to address the different ways on COVID expenditures have increased, you can see that you are still able to keep the expenditures less than budget. Some of that is due to lower utility costs and also transportation as well. Next slide. And again, this is where I mentioned the budget process can really show how well the management knows and understands your environment. I think your fiscal management does a really good job of understanding how the budget works, especially with the general fund, and being able to make modifications as needed when crises arise. Next page. So I always like to talk about the general fund balance and why is it so important. This is obviously a very talked about subject, so we always, as an audit perspective, like to give our opinions on it. Obviously, the revenue streams are inconsistent. Like property taxes and state revenues come in at different times during the year. It's usually in large chunks, not in a month-to-month sequence. It protects you from unnecessary borrowing to meet your expenditures. It's a prudent resource to meet those unexpected emergencies and protect against catastrophic events, such as we are right now with the pandemic. This is why we always encourage you to continue to increase your fund balance when you're able to. And obviously also to meet uncertainties of the state and federal funding, as this does come from the state and federal government, which you don't necessarily have control over. Lisa does a good job of talking through some of those points on pages 6 and 7 of the MD&A to give you some of the things that you have been faced throughout the year. It also helps you ensure a good credit rating if you needed it for loan borrowing, and also helps ensure the future financial stability of the district. Next page. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends at a minimum that general purpose governments, which you are, maintain no less than 1 to 2 months of regular general fund operating expenditures if the fund balance is significant enough. Currently, you're at 44 days after you were able to make another transfer of $200,000, raising the balance to $2 million. So you're right in the middle. I think that's very impressive, and I'm glad to see that occurring. Next slide. This is just a general fund balance year-over-year comparison, showing where you have come from 2017, starting to recover, I think, from the recession, going into 18, and you can see now at 2020 where you're sitting at 6.8 million of balance. Next slide.
Thank you very much. Board, any questions from the board?
Nope.
I think not. Thank you very much for the presentation. It looks very good. It's good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Lisa and your team. You do a great job. Enjoy working with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. I'll sign
Bye.
off.
Okay.
Next, we have our financial update from Lisa, our Chief Financial and Operations Officer.
We'll see how much this week.
Not
Good
that much.
evening.
By the way, congratulations, very nice audit.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So this evening, I've asked to follow our audit presentation, which I've actually never done in my now 18th year. And Michelle, our lead auditor, focused some of her presentation on our general fund reserves, or what's called the fund balance, and it's singularly for that reason that I've asked to follow her presentation. I have 3 slides. It'll probably take about 10 minutes, and an increase to our general fund balance of $2 million sounds like a lot of money, but when we drill down to the details of that increase, you'll see that much of that was planned and strategic. And so I do not want those listening tonight or here in the audience or the school board to be sort of falsely inflated that while our financial position is dramatically improved in fiscal year 20. And so just to define, fiscal year 20 was July 1st, 2019 to June 30th of 2020. And that's what this audit presented tonight was covering. So, is that as big as it's going to get?
That's what I'm just trying.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So I also really want to thank our clerk of the board for working with Michelle to set up that presentation. That was last minute due to a change on her side.
Just so the people in the audience can see, but
I think maybe as I go through, you could just scroll down if we can't.
I think that's
Okay, great.
maybe the best I can
So
do.
there are 7 points here, and I'll start with number 1. So number 1 says that in the audit on page 63, which was Michelle was referring to, that our GFFB means general fund balance, or cash on hand at the end of the fiscal year, was $6.8 million. And she also pointed out, if you could page down to the next page, Kelly, in our audit on page 63, and the audit will be posted on our district website tomorrow along with our external auditor's presentation. So Michelle was telling you that within our general fund, which is defined by the Governmental Accounting Standards Bureau, we account for it separately in 3 different funds. Although when we report to the state and the federal government, we have to report one total. And so we have what we call our general fund, we have our 2-year property tax levy, and then we have general grants, which are mostly locally supported grants. And so if we go to the bottom of this page, in pink, here's the $6.8 million as of June 30th, 2020. Michelle pointed out that the local grants, these are restricted. They're very specific. They must be spent on X, Y, and Z. And then the other 2, the general fund and the supplemental levy, by and large are restricted only by our budgeting process and the school board's decision-making process. So now, Kelly, if we go back up to page 1, under number 1, so out of the $6.8 million, we're going to subtract what's restricted, the $565,000. And so that brings us to $6.2 million. And then under number 2, it says, well, July 1st, 2019, we started at $4.8 million. So our real cash increase for fiscal year 20 is $1.4 million. But there are a couple of other really important factors. The next is under number 3, and on page 8 of our audit, we, in our budgeting process, knew that 3 conflated items would sort of falsely inflate our fiscal year-end fund balance. The first being that the state's public retirement system of Idaho has put what's called the sick leave benefit employer-only tax on hiatus for a year and a half. We also knew that what we had projected on our health insurance premium increase, it came in considerably lower. And thirdly, the way we structured our supplemental levy was based on a projected tax rate, not the dollar amount. And the 3 of those things together are $705,000. So it's just, as I said, inflating our fund balance for 1 year because as of July 1st, 2021, we intend to spend the $700,000. So I'm saying, well, before our supplemental levy adjustments last year, that now the cash increase is $741,000. So now I go to number 4. Number 4 is a function of how we levy our property taxes. We have a $12.7 million levy per year. That's the way the ballot is written. And within those, there are the majority of that is salaries and benefits, but there are also some other large programs, basically all of our technology programs, all of our extracurricular activities programs, and all of our teaching and learning, professional development budget. And those directors, within the 2-year cycle of the levy, have the latitude to spend all the money in year 1, or maybe wait and spend it all in year 2. For example, reviewing a curriculum and then adopting it in year 2. And all of those things happened. In the terms of curriculum, they've chosen to spend the curriculum adoption money, is it science? Science in year 2, the year we're in now that started July 1st. So it's actually saying, well, we have, when all netted out, we have $192,000 sort of, again, sort of falsely inflating. We mostly because of the lack of full spring sports, the extracurricular budget captured or had carry forward money of $35,000 as well. And then the technology director has done just the reverse. He chose to spend mostly in capital items and Chromebooks the money that was budgeted for the full 2-year cycle of the supplemental levy in year 1. So then we get to so the real cash increase at year end was $630,000. And now I pivot to the beginning of the next fiscal cycle, and I want to bring the board up to date on some other important things that have happened, mostly at the state level, but are dramatically impacting the financial performance of our district. So we begin with $630,000 increase from fiscal year 20 to our fund balance. And then if you'll recall, in order to manage the level of budget cuts entering into fiscal year 21, we made a decision to use a considerable amount of our fund balance to balance this budget, and the number is $590,000. We also projected in the spring of 2020, in this budgeting process, that we would take a significant cut to our transportation reimbursement, which is done after the fact. So when transportation delivered in fiscal year 2020 is reimbursed in fiscal year 2021. And that's because as of March 17th, to the close of the school year, we were not transporting students on yellow buses. And we thought that we would lose $573,000. But when the governor issued in early July his 5% pullback to the K-12 appropriation for fiscal year 21, transportation was not one of those line items. So now we submitted our transportation reimbursement to the State Department of Education. And right now, generally they're approved at the end of October, and part of that pivots on what the cost per mile statewide is and the cost per student statewide. But most districts stop transporting students in March. So I'm much more hopeful that we're actually going to capture in our reimbursement the $573,000 that we thought we were going to be forfeiting. I don't know that yet, but I wouldn't put it up on the screen unless I was feeling confident about it. Then there's some other things that have happened under Governor Little. The next is in late August, we and every other school district were granted what they call an online blended learning. And it's governor-directed money, federal money that flows through the governor and the governor directs it. And there are very stringent criteria on how it must be spent and sort of the timing of it. But for us, it was $192,000, and $169,000 of that were things that qualified that we already had in our budget. So we're actually, we're capturing that as revenue now, or just cash. The next big thing that happened says GEER, Governor Little action on September 11th. Again, I talk about it on page 18 of the audit. Our governor, again, federal money that went to our governor, his decision making, he decided to try to assist public school districts, or I'm going to say maybe counter, I'm not quite sure what the right word here is, or the best word, his 5% pullback through executive order. And so for that, a 5% holdback for us is $1.2 million. And no fluke that this gear money is $1,198,000. Like he's trying to really fulfill the 5% that was eliminated from the K-12 appropriation this year by holdback. And of that, 500, and again, it has very strict criteria and timing, which I won't perseverate over, but except for you to know that it's very strict. 524,000 of that was already budgeted funds for us. So we're capturing another 524,000. Conversely, our enrollment in the key enrollment reporting period, and we're reporting for the first time as public school districts in Idaho and going to be paid for the first time in Idaho's history on enrollment, not average daily attendance. But our enrollment has dropped compared to the prior year by about 8.5%. And that in itself will cost us probably about $607,000. Was not anticipated. Moreover, the way that the provision in the state's funding formula looks at drop in enrollment, it's called protection, and the way that that's funded is if a district or districts, plural, have a drop in enrollment, all the other districts pay for that. It's essentially self-funded. So every district so far, except two, according to the State Department of Education, has had a drop in enrollment this year. And if every district if all of those fall into this protected status, which is a drop of 3%, and we know the big districts in the state are in excess of 5 or 6%, that's going to cost us another $630,000. And then other things I covered with you in early September, we have an all-day kindergarten program that this year is tuition-free, and we made that decision after the budgeting process. That's an offset by Panhandle Alliance for Education grant. That's another loss of $90,000, and also an anticipated loss of some Medicaid billable services for our special education population. So that says, well, from July 1st to right now, we've lost about $90,000. So from the beginning of the fiscal year at $6.2 million, we're at about $6.2 million. I want to remind the board that we put on hiatus a board policy to contribute to our general fund. We've been contributing about reserve of $200,000 for several years, and for 2 years we also contributed $200,000 to our plant fund reserve, and we did not do that. But it does at this point position us that we restored the $590,000 that we thought we were going to have to use out of fund balance to budget our balance, our budget this year. And it also maintains the $705,000 that was, pre-planned as we launch into fiscal year 22, which starts July 1st, 2021. And then it also preserves money, the first federal money that was appropriated to all public school districts in the nation in the CARES dollars on March 27th of this year. And for us, the expenditure date is to spend those CARES dollars, which is $535,000, is September 30th of 2022. And because basically every district in the state has experienced this dramatic loss in enrollment, but the appropriation on the state level is built on, actually an increase in students compared to the prior year. We have been in contact with our governor's office and legislators. Legislators are hearing across the state that perhaps there should be a change to this protection provision. And if that happens for us, even if the self-funded part, that's $600,000. So those were my remarks. I just didn't want the board to walk away thinking that we had truly increased our fund balance by $2 million, because much of it was already carved up for another fiscal year, future fiscal year, given that we have a flat levy. Are there any questions?
Word? Gary?
Well, the auditors gave us a really great picture as of June 30th, right? But your analysis here goes forward from that. And there are a couple items here I'm still a little clear about. We know the governor announced a 5% pullback, right, which is $1.2 million for us. We also know that our enrollment is down about 8.5%, but we're protected on that, right? We can only absorb a 3% reduction in revenue from our enrollment numbers. The thing I'm not clear about is this other item you've got in here, the unbudgeted $630,000. You said that's related to the enrollments of the other school districts across the state, and that it's possible the legislature may restore some of those money. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, so the protection provision says if a school district experiences a loss of enrollment or the statute actually reads a loss of average daily attendance in the first reporting period, which means the first 9 weeks of school, so right about now up to November 1st, compared to the prior year, they will be protected in dollar amount to to basically, like for us, we're losing 8.5%, but from an appropriation standpoint, they will appropriate a loss of 3% of average daily attendance. And I don't know how they're going to do this with average daily attendance versus enrollment for the first time this year. I really don't.
Yeah.
But, and protection has been around since I've been here, which is now quite a long time. And that used to be the end of the protection. But when the recession kicked in 2009, they added more to that statute. And what they added is, well, instead of the state dipping into their education reserve fund, which is called the state stabilization fund, all respective school districts will fund the other school district's loss in enrollment. So I can give you an example. Last year, we weren't in protection, but it cost our school districts $32,000 to fund the other school districts that fell into protection.
So since all the districts
So now, when you have almost every single school district falling into protection, that number goes from $32,000 to $630,000.
It's like self-insurance.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
a whole bunch of people got sick all at once.
Right, that's.
Yeah.
But the flip side, to repeat myself, is that the K-12 appropriation at the state level, $2 billion, is based on actually an increase in average daily attendance and number of students. So there's a very strong argument to say, well, maybe you take away that sort of self-funded provision for a year.
Right. So,
Okay, Jerry, we need to move along. I hate to cut it off, but it's getting,
Yeah.
okay. Lisa, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you kind of explaining, I did have that false sense of, hey, there's extra money here, let's put some of it toward another area, but it's really already kind of accounted for. Thank you.
We're not as wealthy as we think we are, but
No.
we're in good shape.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
We're going to move right along here. The next we have is a
Presentation.
school presentation, Sandpoint Middle School, and we're so lucky to have its principal here, Casey McLaughlin.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. I don't think it is not reading it.
I printed it for them.
Okay, that's
And
great.
I printed you one if you don't have it.
Well, my computer is not
It says
reading
Apple
it
TV.
either. It's not saying anything. It's not even coming up anymore. It did at first, it said Master TV.
Well, now that I'm off of it, can you try hitting your airplane again?
There's, airplane's not even coming up. You need the resident techie.
Do you have the password, Wi-Fi password for here?
I'm on the I'm on Wi-Fi here. I just don't have the Apple TV coming up or even the icon for it at the moment. Here, I'll use this here. That's great.
Another.
I
Good.
realize that was cool. I like the color.
No, I like it.
Red and white, oh, super.
Thanks, Keith. You're welcome.
All right, did you find it? Yeah, I don't know what's, it came up earlier when I checked, and then, but nothing actually came up, it just said Master TV, it didn't say. anything else. Well, first of all, I will start by just thanking the board. We've had a great school year so far, and after having my own students at home, 3 students at home last year for a good portion, and of course trying to be a principal at home, I just appreciate everything that all of you are doing. I know it could be a thankless job, and thank you very much for your hard work and for everything you're doing. It's very much appreciated. left on this one if you want me to. I just shared it.
I shared it with myself.
Okay, I'll just share it with Kelly too, so.
Casey, how many students in the middle school?
We are at 498, unless it shifted. We're actually up in enrollment,
Yeah, it's, okay.
which is great.
You're cutting ahead in his first.
Yeah, great.
Well, I saw the fall sports participants and I was wondering.
Which is pretty
what
great.
percent- That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot, and it doesn't count, we didn't have the clear numbers for, we have IBOB, it's the Idaho Battle of the Books. So some of these clubs, Math Counts Club and some of these different ones, we don't have a clear number yet because kids are kind of coming and going. So really there's more participants, yeah, which is great. So we like to count all those numbers together, there's athletics, activities, yeah, so. All right, so first of all, again, thank you very much. This has obviously been a unique year, and at the same time, it's been an excellent year. We're having a great start to our school year. And really, what I wanted to present, obviously there's some changes and some different things, but the reality is what we do is what we do, no matter if there's COVID or not COVID or anything else. And so we are always striving to do these three things every single year. And the number one is we want students to feel like they're in a safe environment, safe and positive culture. That's what we push for. Our mission statement is to make learning irresistible, and we try to do that. We're constantly asking ourselves the question of what does that look like, what does it mean? Our expectations for student learning, we are consistently looking at data, looking and reviewing what we can do better. And I think our process for that, and we'll talk about that here soon, has just improved over the years, and our teachers are, which is pretty great. That's kind of the most exciting thing for me as a principal, is our teachers are now leading that, where I don't have to lead all of those data conversations and those questions to say, what can we do better? The teachers, every time I go into meetings with teachers, they're asking those questions and saying, okay, here's some things we can do better. How do we get there? And so we've dove into our math goals this year, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes, and our ELA goals. And really, we're happy with some, but of course we've got some gaps. And we've got some gaps, especially with what we're seeing. And then, of course, our PLC expectations are another one of our big things. And PLCs are our positive learning communities that we do at our school. Excuse me. So really quickly, just wanted to run through some of those ways that we try to work to help have kids feel safe in our school and to feel like a part of it. Obviously, there's some changes this year with having lunch in the classroom instead of having lunch as a whole. There's some different changes that are taking place, but we are still really, really intentional about trying to create connections with students. I think more than ever, it's really important that we really focus on some mental health, that we recognize that students really need to know other students, and there's some social aspects of being a middle schooler that are incredibly important. Being a middle schooler, I think, is kind of unique. I taught at the high school. I was an elementary principal, and now as a middle school principal. There is no doubt that it is a unique few years, and they are motivated, unlike others. At elementary, there's a lot of motivation by the teacher, and at high school, there's a lot of motivation for yourself and your friends. But more than anything, at middle school, it is all about your friends and those relationships you create. And so that's pretty big, and figuring out who you are and those things. So we try to work really hard to help students and to create some opportunities for relationships. And so you'll see just some of these pictures, just some things that we've done. There's different activities that we try to do to get kids together in a safe environment. And of course, we have competitions in every class. This picture was just one of many classes. They all have to create their own mascot in case they win the competition. It can be displayed. And this is Mr. Clary's mascot. He went on and bought one, and they decorate it differently every week.
I thought he looked old for a middle school student.
Yeah, he's a little old. He
Yeah.
actually looks this week like a Sasquatch.
Okay.
They found some hair that they went ahead and put all around his body, and every week it looks a little bit different, or every couple weeks, and so they're having fun with it. But there's a lot of different things that we do just to get kids involved, get to know each other, get to know their teachers, basically feel like they're a part. Communication is always big for us as well. We try to push out all sorts of different communication. With Schoology, we give out behavior grades every mid-quarter, and we think that's really important. Number one, we don't want behavior to ever become a part of our academic grades, because we know that if we're reporting how a student's doing academically, we know it's really important that we're not reporting that his academics are poor just because he gets to class late. We need to report that separately, and parents need to know how that student's doing. So we have different reporting on behavior grades. We do student vlogs every week. We do a parent vlog. Mrs. Grenier and myself do a parent vlog where we will get on and do a video and send that out to parents about every other week. Sometimes it's every week depending on what's happening. We keep up some social media pages as well. And so this year, and you can see that on that little flyer I gave you, but we started football this year. We also, we have a cheer club now as well. Football, this was, boy, I remember when football went away from the middle school. That was probably 10 to 12 years ago. We brought it back this year, and we've got 65 students that came in. They're excited. They're doing a great job, phenomenal coaching. Just the program's been really, really cool. In fact, Ms. Grenier would be here tonight, but we had a game come up, and so she's there at Memorial right now with that game. But as you can see, we've got 270 just student athletes involved in sports currently, and that's right now. 270 out of, we call it 500 students, just a hair under 500 students. That's pretty darn good. And then now we're not even counting those students that are involved in math counts and in IBOB. We started a club called Next Enrichment, which is bringing in just different people from the community. For example, Dan Shook is coming from his bicycle shop. What's the name of it?
BCB.
Yeah, BCB, Bonner County Bikes. He's coming in, of course, a former teacher and friend of mine, and he's coming in to teach students how to do bicycle repairs and how to do that, and he's going to come after school. We have Rory from 7B Skate Shop. He's planning on coming in next month. He was going to come in before and had to cancel, but he's coming in next month, and so kids are excited about these things. We're finding things that they're excited about. They've got this chunk of time after school from 1 o'clock, on, and we're trying to capture some of them and say, hey, we've got some positive activities for you and some things that might capture your interest. So we've got students involved, and I would say with math counts and IBOB, and then next we've got well over 300 students doing different activities out of 500. So our expectations again are the same. I wanted to address a couple things here though. I think really some of our increased enrollment is due to the fact that we have offered, and aggressively, I think at the middle school, have offered some different avenues for learning. For one, we have put everything on Schoology. That was kind of a district-wide push at the end of last year, recognizing that COVID and the pandemic and everything else, that we needed to reach families, whether they're in school or out, with the ability to learn. And so we have pushed everything, agendas, assignments, everything is accessible online. And so we even have teachers who are putting videos online just for those students that can't be there pretty consistently. We also started our own, what we're calling our e-school. We funded it within our school, so there's no funding coming from the district. We pulled money from different curriculum budgets to do that. But basically what we've done is we've created a teacher-driven, so what it is our core subjects. There's a teacher representing every core subject in 7th and in 8th grade, and those teachers are teaching the students who cannot be at school or who have chosen to stay home and do a version of kind of homeschooling through our e-school. And so what they will do is they'll follow exactly online with what the students in the class are doing. And so they will go daily and have the same assignments, the same teaching, everything else. That teacher will push out videos and different things to teach the direct instruction, as well as all the other materials and everything else that we are getting in school. Cool thing about that is we've had probably 5 or 6 of those students come back to us, and of course they are exactly on the same page as all their peers. And they can come right back into any of our core classes and be ready to go exactly where they were when they left, or if they started in that. So it's pretty great. We also have IDLA that we offer, and so we've got several students on IDLA. I think with those and with our aggressive pushing out of that, we were able to keep students. And as you notice in our SMS, we have actually increased our enrollment and increased our projected enrollment. We projected quite a bit lower. We've come up higher than we actually projected from last year, before the pandemic or anything else, which is great. And then our goals, we consistently we're looking at ways to address our math gaps. And as we've talked about, math was a big point of concern when we looked at scores. When students came in, we had them take the MAP assessment. We looked at that data, we recognized pretty clearly that we had some big gaps. The students that were gone during the end of the school year last year, fourth quarter, had massive math gaps coming back. They are not where they needed to be. And so we noticed that pretty quickly. We're addressing that. We're finding a bunch of ways, and I'll talk about that in a minute. On the flip side, ELA actually showed some increased proficiency, and the theory kind of is a little bit that, it's students at home, they can continue to read books. It's easier for parents to understand what an ELA curriculum is asking you to do than often it is for math. So some of our lead measures, what we do to support our academic goals, we're really looking at 4 things. We utilize our PLC structure, which really, that is our teachers. So our teachers, for example, in 7th grade ELA, make up a PLC. They're a 7th grade ELA team, and they work together to basically increase student learning. One of the things we've asked them to do is utilize interim block assessments, so they are familiar with what they're being asked from the state in terms of the type of questions that the students will see. We also ask our teachers that every 10 days, and this is a have to in our school, every 10 days, every PLC will do a common formative assessment. And what that is everybody does some type of assessment. It can be anything. It can be an exit ticket, it can be a quiz, it can be a verbal communication or something else. But they take data on that, and all 3 teachers in the core curriculum will do that at the same time. Same day, then they get together and they talk about it. How'd it go? How'd your students do on this? And what they're trying to do with that data is, number 1, improve individual practice. So if I as a teacher and Lonnie were teaching together, and his students did far better on one question or something, I would ask Lonnie, what did you do? How did you teach that? How can I get better? Like, what can I do? What can I take from you, Lonnie, to teach that? The second thing is build our capacity to achieve our goals. So we're looking at that data and saying, okay, where are we missing this? And then, of course, we find those places where students are struggling, and we look to intervene or extend or help them in some way. And so we find ways to help each of those students that are struggling, and it's every 10 days. And so students really are not falling through the cracks that way because we can find out where. Another thing that we noticed when we review data is that we consistently, on the ISATs, we're low in brief writes, and those are short, 2-paragraph answers, and we were doing fairly poorly on that, and we couldn't, we tried to address it in some different ways. So this year we said, you know what, we're going to make that a priority in our school. We're going to make sure students know how to write, and not just write an essay, but do some brief writes, quick answers. And so that is a priority for every single teacher, is utilizing brief writes into their classroom curriculum, from PE all the way through math and everyone else. And so they're diving in and doing a lot of writing. And then, of course, we've adopted standard-based grading as well. So last little bit, just to give you a heads up, and I won't go through this a lot, but just our PLC culture has come a long way. It is really, really the backbone of our school at this point. Each group, whether it's the ELA, 7th grade ELA PLC or the 8th grade math PLC, they're taking collective responsibility for the student learning. And it's fantastic to see because they're looking at data, they're making sure students understand what's happening. They are challenging each other and challenging themselves quite a bit. And that culture has really, really helped us to take off as a school. So the 4 critical questions is what they look at. I'm not going to go through that, but that's really what we're focused on. We want to understand where students are at. We want to know what we want students to learn. Have they learned it? What do we do if they don't? What do we do if they obviously have learned it already? So just some of the ways that we intervene. Pre-COVID, we had a great system going, and I really felt like last year we were honing it in. We had an entire class period dedicated to reteaching students, where students would switch at 3rd period. They would switch up, and if you were struggling in math, you'd go to your math teacher, and you'd get retaught a certain standard or a subject. And even if I didn't have a certain teacher, if I didn't have Mr. Albertson, I might go to Mrs. Ald and have her help me out with a certain standard, because that's who was going to teach it that day. So we had a pretty clear system. This year, we've had to adjust that. We've had to say, okay, there's some things we have to fix. So what we've done is we have actually created what we call after-school ZAP, and ZAP stands for Zeros Are Not Permitted. And actually, everybody says zeros aren't, but I hate saying that. So, but zeros are not permitted. And basically what it is after school help. We call parents, we invite students to ZAP. So if students are struggling, whether they have zeros or if they are just struggling with a concept, we will call parents, we'll send a note to the student and invite them to after school ZAP to help them out. And so we're seeing quite a bit of success. Not every student can go all the time because of busing, but we are seeing and we're finding other ways to pull those students in. And then the last thing is we do a ton of incentives in middle school. And so middle school students are very much, we can incentivize, get your schoolwork in, and we'll let you have, like we'll cut off a day with 45 minutes left in the day. We'll do some fun activities where you can see your friends. They are motivated by that. And so that is happening actually on Friday this week because Halloween is on Saturday. So we've got some fun games they'll be able to do and different things. It's still a social distance, but there's some fun things. And all of a sudden, like student workload is coming in. All those zeros are coming in and different things. And so we try to keep the fun there for students because we know that's important for student motivation at the middle school age. And then finally, just the last thing, just collective teacher advocacy. We've got almost every teacher involved in some type of team, and that they're leading. I'm not leading those teams, and so it's just great to see just the collective buy-in. And that is it. So if you've got questions, I'm happy to.
Casey, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I have one
great.
question.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, how are your teachers and students coping with the COVID environment?
Great. They're great. You know, there's really teachers, we don't really even notice it. I mean, really the focus is so much on student learning and the PLC work that we're doing that the COVID environment has not been a big issue. I think the biggest issue that I hear is, and we're very intentional about trying to address it, is people don't feel like they get to see each other enough. You know, there's not as much social interaction from teacher to teacher, and because they used to have their prep periods where they get to, intermingle and everything else, and of course student to student. And so we're trying to be very intentional about creating those environments where students can be still that social interaction, because they're middle schoolers and they love that. Yeah, so that's a good.
Any questions, Gary?
We discussed briefly, how the short school days have affected, the daily schedule for the students and the core curriculum and the elective curriculum,
Yeah.
the choices they have.
It's both good and bad. So there's some really great positives that we're learning that honestly I didn't think would come out of this, and that we're saying, oh wow, okay. You should, like student behavior, there's virtually no, we are not dealing with poor student behavior. Students come in, they're ready to learn, they're ready to go. So there's this added urgency that's going on. I think that's the best way to put it. That's important. There's some things in there that structurally we're recognizing. We changed our school day. Gary, one of the things we did is we had an A-B schedule. And we noticed through this that A-B schedule probably isn't the best for 12, 13, 14-year-olds. Because an A-B schedule means they've got more classes and they don't see every teacher every day. And so now we said, okay, you know what? Let's get rid of A-B and let's switch it quarter. And I mean, it's fairly obvious to me now as we're talking about it, but for the middle school mind, lessening how much they have to think about and organize and have to worry about turning in. My own son was, struggled a lot with that, just turning things in and making sure it's all organized. That's taken that away. Now they worry about 5 classes instead of 8 or 9. And so that's been big. The flip side of that is, I consistently have teachers talking to me. Kathy Prummer came up to me yesterday and said, I just wish we had that 10 more minutes. Like, I feel like we just need 10 more minutes of math. But I don't think any teacher anytime is going to tell me they need less math.
Kathy would always want more math.
Kathy will always want more math. And so there's definite validity to that for sure. And some of those extension things that you do in a classroom, where at the last 10 minutes or 15 minutes of class that you can take a small group and you work or you do some independent learning, that's missing a little bit. So there's some things that we take and keep for sure, and there's some things that I think we've looked at back.
So Casey, of the 498 students on any given day, how many are relying on remote learning?
So we have around, I have to think of the numbers.
Just
I don't know how
roughly.
Yeah, roughly, I'd say about, because it changes, so we keep getting students back. But I'd say there's probably about 40 some, 40 to 45 in remote learning.
Well, listen, we're gonna move on, but thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Appreciate you, thank you.
Keep up the good work, too.
Thanks.
The next item we have on here is ISP resolution discussions. This was on here before, and for the audience, this is, we have an annual meeting with the State Board of Education, and we're putting forth so many resolutions that come from all the school districts around. We've discussed these before, so I'm just gonna say, Gary, I need your list, and Tanya, I need yours.
Yep.
And do you have any questions? This is the second time it's been on.
Well, number 7, I'm still not clear on, the social studies content standards.
Well,
Change
if
it
you
to a-
have what was put out by ISB, the rationale.
I read that, I read the detailed analysis, yeah,
And you still don't understand it?
no.
Okay, well, I'll talk to you later. I don't either, but I kind of agree what's there. It's, as I said before, they're trying to, the resolution is trying to change the social studies and to put, instead of have more Western civilization than just world history.
Right.
So make the emphasis more on Western culture, Western civilization. And right now, it gets a short shrift, according to the write-up, the author that did that. So anyway, the ISBA did not, that's not one they passed along with approval. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes. Next board, we have COVID-18 in our district with our superintendent. Please give us an update.
Yeah, so I want to take a little bit of time here. Okay, and I'm not gonna put this in a presentation view. I wanted to go over and review with you the metrics that we follow. They are the 7-day average of positive cases, the percent positivity on the PCR test, and the hospitalization healthcare capacity. Before I do that, I think I'll jump down to the bottom here and remind you, this is what Panhandle Health District has put out, and you can see that we are still in yellow. And so the metrics that we have do not move us to an elevated spot like Boundary County nor Kootenai County. So we are still in the yellow based on those metrics. I did want to share with you, this is the 7-day average. This is the information that is up to date, and you can see as of October 27th, we are at 13.1. To elevate our status, I believe it would have to go above 15%, between that 8 to 15. So you can see what's happening, and this is just in Bonner County. And so this is, again, that 7-day average of the number of cases.
It's number of new cases, average number of new
Correct.
cases.
Daily,
Right?
correct.
New
Okay.
cases, yeah.
Yes.
So we need that to come down a little. Okay.
This is one that I still ask for an update on. You can see it's still back in October 17th. This is the percent positivity. We would like this to be below 5% to move to green, which we're all hoping for. It's at 6.9%, if this was back on October 17th, so it is not updated. And then this gives us the number of tests that were actually given. And again, this was Bonner County. So, you know, relatively for the state, we're doing well. But again, we would like to see these numbers go down. And then, you know, when they talk about hospitalization capacity, everybody knows that Governor Little did move us to back to a Category 3, and we know that Kootenai Medical Health was at 99% or 100% capacity. You know, You know, we're not, Bonner General is not, have that many ICU units and has not got really a report on their capacity at this point in time. So, when I did get a report from Bonner General Health, I believe there was one individual, I think, and I don't know if that was in the ICU or medical, or the medical side of things. So anyway, just wanted to share this with you a little bit. And just for things to keep you up to date on. For Lake Pend Oreille School District, as I shared 2 weeks ago, we have our own data here that our nursing staff keeps. And in the last 2 weeks, we have only increased by 1. And that's very good news. So we only saw this last week, 1 new case at Sandpoint High School. And so I just want to continue to keep you updated on this as well. So we are up to 14 total positive cases that have been between staff and students in Lake Pend Oreille School District.
That's year, okay, yeah, year to date.
Yes. Yep. So I want to have a little discussion with you. What could close schools short term? So yeah, we have some increases. I think I do have this other data here. I think this is the county where we have 112 active cases. This was updated today. So that is increasing. I remember first week of school, I was really excited talking to you, and we were at 15 active cases. It's at 112. So there's not enough data here for me to draw a big conclusion. Are there cases in our community? Yes. Are we really lucky that they're staying out of our schools? We can sit here and hypothesize on, you know, why we haven't seen a big increase in schools, or we're just hoping maybe it's just not coming. But I want to say that when I go into schools, I appreciate how hard our teachers are working, how hard our paraprofessionals are working, how hard our principals are in trying to, in the smiles on the kids' faces when I get to go into the elementary schools, and you saw Principal McLaughlin and all the positive things that are happening, was still trying to put the safety precautions, and it's just that balance, and where is that balance? And that's what's really, really hard. Do we all want to go back to just normal? Absolutely. We can't get there soon enough, but again, we've got to look at the data that we have. So really, the current yellow plan we have, I believe, provides flexibility and parent choice. My recommendation is to the board is that we don't look at moving right now from our educational plan, even though I get information daily from people who are worried about what's going on in the community, worried what's happening in Boundary County, worried what's happening in Kootenai County. And at the same time, I get people contacting me thinking that, you know, we don't have much going on in our schools and we need to just get back to normal. And I've got this spectrum, and it's really hard for me to try to find where is that balance? Where is that balance for 3,500 plus students to continue their education? And I know I'm a big proponent, as I've told you multiple times, of parent choice. I respect the parents that are not sending their kids to school because they do not feel safe for them or it's not the right environment. And I also want to keep schools open 5 days a week. My concern that we need to be thinking about is, I don't think it's students and cases of students that are ever going to make us shut our schools down. It's going to be the health of our staff. And it's going to be our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our bus drivers, our food service, and our maintenance is extremely important in keeping all our schools open. We were a week ago very critical of not being able to run some bus routes. Our transportation director and his assistant, James and Shelley, are driving. I mean, it is hard. We've got people typically that would be driving buses that are choosing not to for health reasons or concerns. That is something that we have to watch. I've got teachers that want to get back to normal. I've got teachers that are saying, I need medical leave because I'm concerned and are at a high risk group. I've got the spectrum here. So these are things that I just wanted to bring to your attention. It's not the students that are going to probably saying we're going to have to shut schools down. It's going to be, can we keep our work force healthy and moving? And I'm so proud of them, and they are working extremely hard, and great things are going on in the schools. But with that, we've got to keep that in mind. One thing that multiple parents have brought up to me, and I think it's important, is, and I want to remind the board that you are, you have been given the decision-making power from the state. Panhandle Health is an advisory group. They give us not regulatory, they're not telling us what to do, but they're giving us good guidance. And, I appreciate that. There's one thing, though, that I would like to talk about today, and for you to have a discussion about, and I can answer questions, is when there is a positive in a school and a group of students are determined to be a close contact. Okay? In our reopening plan, we have followed CDC guidelines that it says that that group of close contacts then must self-isolate for 14 days. We've had a kindergarten class have to go out for 14 days. We've had a second grade class have to go out. We've had life skills students that had to go out for 14 days. We've had, in addition, a group of 18 students at one of our secondary schools that had to go out for 14 days, 73 students. Most recently, we have a group of 13 students who are self-isolating for 14 days, partially because of where they sat in the classroom, partially because they didn't know, but the person who tested positive, they came in the next period and sat in that seat. I mean, these are the things we're dealing with, and so it's hard academically on the students, and it's also very difficult emotionally on the students to miss that much school. So if you are with the CDC guideline, that means that student at minimum is going to miss 10 days of school. That means if it worked out perfect, where they got to take 2 weekends, that's 4 days, and then they got to take 2 full weeks, they do not get to go to school for that time, which is concerning to student learning and emotional well-being. And this is an observation. I don't think our data is, I don't have enough data to say that this is scientific or anything, but of all those groups of students who have had to self-isolate, we have not had one positive case or case of COVID based off of a contact that they had at school. Okay? And so this is an observation. I'm not going to declare to say that I have enough data to do that. So where is that balance between safe with the spread of COVID in a school setting and when is it detrimental to missing school? And I wanted to share with you that our neighboring school districts are all having the same conversation. Maybe we're being a little ahead of them, maybe in a week or two. This is a discussion we're having at regional superintendent meetings. And so what I'm really asking you here is to have a discussion around these questions. Self-isolate time frame considerations. These are just my thoughts I put here. There's a difference between you're in a household and you're living with a person who's tested positive for COVID versus I just happen to be sitting 5 feet, 5 inches away from a person because we're following the guidelines of you know, within, were you within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes? And I'm not saying that's a bad guideline. I don't know. I think like most of us, we don't know. But I'm saying is I think there's a difference there. Should a negative test be part of the criteria to get to return? And what's the difference between the PCR test and the rapid diagnostic test? And I did send that to you, and I've learned a lot about that. It's not that the rapid diagnostic test is bad, but it is only sensitive if you're symptomatic. And they say that if you take that within the first 4 days that you're symptomatic, that will give you the most accurate results. The PCR test is more sensitive, and from what I've been told by medical experts locally here, is it's the gold standard of the test. It will determine, detect COVID positivity, whether or not you are asymptomatic or not, and that is most accurate between days 5 and 8. If you miss the window for the quick antigen test. So I'm looking at this as we want to be as safe as possible, try to find the middle ground, and I throw out to you to have a discussion or ask questions about what if we were to self-isolate for 9 days instead of 14. And when I do the math, that means if it happened to land perfectly over 2 weekends, a student would only miss 5 days of school, not 10, and at most would be 7, not 12. And it's after that time that CDC has recommended that the positivity of tests are most accurate between 5 and 8. Is there, could we miss a positive case? Are we being overly cautious with 14 days? I don't know, this is a discussion, but I think we have to look at both. How are we harming our kids by having them not be able to go to school versus, you know, trying to be really cautious. So with that, those are my comments, and I would like to answer any questions the board might have. Yes?
I'm assuming your last bullet point, return on day 10 if they were asymptomatic and had that PCR test, or is it?
Yeah, I think there would have to be some criteria there. I think, I believe in family choice. Families, if they don't want to go get tested, I've had families tell me, I'll go get my kids tested to get them back in school. And I said, I know, but the CDC guideline says it's got to be 14 days. And this is why we're bringing this up here, and it's not just one parent. I've had parents, and I don't want to force a parent to go get a test.
True.
I believe in parental choice. You could stay. If you don't want to go get the test, I understand. Let's work with the teacher on the learning management system, on Google Classroom or Schoology, and just let's do the 14 days. That fits our family better.
Well, what's the problem with doing 9 days and if the child has no symptoms? Let them return to school.
Because without a test?
Yes.
Well, because I think the medical experts are saying that
And the thing is, we have no data.
People can be asymptomatic and still be
Yeah,
spreading.
but why can't we try that and see? We have some figures already. And so, yeah, we don't know for sure. There's no guarantee.
I guess I want to go back to what's going to close our schools down, Carrie, is the health of our teachers, our bus drivers, and so I want to be very concerned about that, so that if we knew that they were not positive, then I think that gives us an assurance there with our workforce too. That would be a counter that I would be concerned about.
Mr. Chairman, Tom, what's the turn time on the PCR test? Do we know that? Question 1.
Yeah.
Question 2, let's say Johnny gets a test on day 4, okay? So he should be able to get the test on day 4, right?
Well,
Between 4.
we would recommend between 5 and 8.
So let's say Johnny gets the test on day 5.
Correct.
He gets a negative, on day 6, gets called back, hey, you're negative. Why would we not let that kid back in school?
Doesn't go back into.
Because there still could be a false negative.
But, I mean,
This is why we're having this discussion.
yeah, I mean, and I'm
I'm
not
trying to
trying
find
to
that,
be.
I'm trying to find that middle ground, and I'm here advocating as an educator,
Yep.
not as a medical professional, that I'm looking at, trying to get kids back in school, at the same time, not making too drastic of a decision that puts our teachers, our bus drivers, and then all of a sudden we have a situation where we have to close schools down anyway, because we don't have a workforce, because I can say, if we went back to look at that, of the 14, I believe 8 are students and 6 are adults. And I can tell you the positive cases that are coming in from students are coming from somebody in their household, one of their parents tested positive, or their workplace tested positive. I can't connect to say, a classmate was positive, so now you've been positive. I don't have that. It just hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying it won't.
Yeah.
It just hasn't happened.
The cohort spread hasn't happened.
Yeah, and in the elementary schools, the cohorts, I mean, we have had to send some cohorts out, and I know you received emails about those, and those are tough conversations. Those are really hard to tell a kindergarten and second grader they don't get to go to school. I mean, and then we don't have, and I'm just saying this, I'm trying to find that middle ground somewhere, and maybe we start somewhere with some testing to give families an option, and then we can gently release more. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I can tell you as a math and science teacher, it's hard for me to go away from CDC guidelines and recommendations, but I feel that we have that right. They are guidelines, and I'm not here proponent to go way far away from them. I'm just trying to find something that might cut the amount of time that kids had to be out of school in half.
So can I ask just another question on that? So what's the difference of a 9-day isolation than a 6-day? If they were to get a negative, what's different? What's different for waiting 3 more days? It's not like they're going to get tested again.
You could become symptomatic again. So from what I've understood and when I have read a lot, I've talked to a lot of medical experts. If a person is going to get COVID-19, they are contagious 48 hours prior to before they show symptoms. So that's where, and then from day 2 to 14 is the time when, any time within there is when they typically could be contagious. That's what's out there from the medical world and the scientists. Is that being very cautious? I don't know. And I'm not here to debunk any of that. I'm saying is, I think we need to base a decision off of what we're seeing with our students right now. But I caution very carefully that my biggest concern is we're going to shut schools down if we have no teachers and no substitutes and no paras and no bus drivers because they're sick with COVID. I mean, that is a concern I do have.
I agree.
Well, so it was 14 days, you haven't found any cases. Well, I don't see what's the problem with just reducing that gradually and see what kind of data that comes in.
And the reason I chose 9 days is because that basically, and I know things don't happen in a nice cookie cutter approach, but 9 days puts, if you take two days on each weekend, that's 4 of them. Kids then are self-isolating for 1 week, not 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I know it's a hardship on families. It really is. But I also know that, we've got increased cases in our community at the same time. So I think we need to be cautious.
Jeremy?
I'd like to say I support you, Tom, you know, and I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that as per the superintendent's guidelines here, that we reduce the self-isolation to 9 days, return on the 10th day, with the condition that the students have a negative test and no further exposure during that period.
And I'd like to say they need,
Wait a minute, there's a motion on it.
Well, I had a question before the motion
Okay,
came
we
up.
can discuss it once we get it, if it's second. Do we have a second to that motion?
I didn't hear him say asymptomatic, and I would like to.
And I'll add asymptomatic. The student continues to be asymptomatic, has had no further exposures, and, you know, has a negative test.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
I would say.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we consider the motion at hand here. So now's the time for discussion before we take a vote on it.
I have a question for the superintendent.
Yeah.
So have you had the opportunity to talk to Brian Smith on the comfort level that the teachers have with their teaching environment?
right,
Because they're the ones in the classroom.
right. I had that discussion. This is something that, again, why I think some of these conditions need to be in place to protect, to make sure we're not getting adults that are working with kids sick. So I've started that conversation. It has not been to a point where it's been fully vetted.
Yeah.
But
I just want the teachers to feel that we are hearing their concerns as well in this conversation, since they're the ones physically in the classroom.
And I had some teachers whose own kids needed to go for 14 days, and I can tell you, it's a long time and it's a hardship.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, you're gonna have people on the spectrum from here to here
Yeah,
during COVID in any issue. I can just,
sure.
it's there.
Any further discussion on the motion?
I would just like to say, as an ex-teacher, if I was teaching, I'd want my kids back as soon as I could get them back.
But I would also want to make sure that you're not exposing you as a teacher too prematurely, so then all of a sudden, I don't have you as a teacher. So.
I know, and it's tough.
That's why
Yeah,
this
it's the
is
balance.
difficult, but I'm just saying is, and I'm not saying that this can't be revisited even again.
Sure.
Are we allowed to be a part of this at all?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm
Sorry, sorry.
Okay, any further questions on the motion, which is basically to reduce the quarantine from 14 days, which is now, to 9 days.
With the
provided-
stipulations.
With the stipulations that we have
Asymptomatic,
in asymptomatic.
tested, no
Negative.
further, no
With
further,
the
no further
PCR,
contact
with the
exposures.
PCR test,
No,
so,
I'm not going to differentiate.
Well, I would say let it's the ones that tested.
and not reside. Okay?
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that is carried on unanimous vote. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is the emergency provisional certificate for Michelle Adams. We have it in our docket, we've read that, so do you have anything to add?
I can just tell you that Michelle had been a parapro at Hope Elementary prior to that and is working on her teaching certificate. And so we're moving her from that .5 para to .5 teacher.
Okay, great.
Okay. So, based on this, I would move to approve the one-year emergency provisional certificate for Michelle Adams.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we vote on the emergency provision certificate for Michelle Adams. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. That motion is adopted. Next, we have the second reading of policy, which is 3525 immunization requirements. This is the second reading. We've had it before, so do you have anything to add?
No, I would just add that the board discussed this and heard this at the last regular meeting and didn't have any edits to the policy presented.
So I would make a motion to adopt revision to policy 3525 immunization requirements.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the revision to policy 3525, immunization requirements. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And then we're down to, we have just limited announcements here. We're just going to ask our superintendent.
Chairman, can I say one thing before
Sure.
the superintendent does? Just for those who are still here, if there's not, we can't address what was on public comment because it's not part of our agenda. So it's not that that we're just ignoring what was said in public comment. It's just not part of today's agenda. Thank you.
If we have questions we want answered, can we email you and have them on the next agenda?
You can email us, and then there's a conversation agenda planning, so, thank you.
Two announcements I have. The State Board of Education did waive the senior project graduation requirement for this year. So I just wanted to make the board be aware of that. And the free meals program for anyone in our community 18 years or under has been extended for the remainder of the school year. So, we have families, we try to get this out as much as we can, families, whether they're homeschooling, whether they're doing IDLA, whether they're, anybody 18 or under then can get a free meal at any of our school sites. And so we can reach out to Bobby Coleman, the Director of Food Services, to make that arrangement of where they can pick up that food. So that is, the USDA has extended that waiver. So those are the two announcements.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's getting late. This meeting is adjourned.